So tell me now, how are we going to reconcile? How are we going to reconcile? Because we're talking about reconciliation. And today, Liberians are downhearted. We are traumatized.
Six students from the Penn Law Transnational Legal Clinic went to Ghana with the Advocates for Human Rights, an organization based in Minnesota, to disseminate the findings from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and the Diaspora Report, but more so the latter, to Liberian refugees remaining on the camp and to gather information on the current conditions on the camp.
And we wanted to see where they were now, what the challenges facing them were, and what their likely options were moving forward.
A large part of the sessions were spent with refugees being allowed to ask questions or just telling us about what's been going on. There was a lot of frustration within these meetings. We found that a lot of people were basically saying, people come here and give us all this information and they keep asking us to tell them, you know, what are we frustrated with? What are our lives like? What's going to happen to us if our refugee status is taken away or if we now have to go back to Liberia? But people just leave and nothing happens.
Water I drink, I pay for it. The toilet I go to, I pay for it.
I was surprised by the conditions on the camp because it's been there for 20 years. So you would think that by this point there would be more infrastructure. There would be running water, there would be regular trash pickup, there would be maybe some paved roads, but there isn't anything like that.
The people in the camp are facing a lot of challenges. Some of the basic ones are just kind of access to necessities. You have to pay for food on the camp, they have to pay for water on the camp, they have to pay to go to the bathroom on the camp.
A lot of them can't afford to pay to use the bathroom, so they go and use like a forest woody area called the Gulf. And it's land that's officially owned by the Ghanaians, and a lot of them told us about how if they go there and the Ghanaians catch them using that land to go to the bathroom, they get abused, they get beaten up. Even though the running water is now on the camp and they're supposed to pay for it, those camps, the forces have been locked or shut down for the last month. Now the challenge is the fact that even though technically the Liberian refugees are allowed to work in Ghana because they're allowed to get work permits, just getting the work permits is very difficult because the employer wants to see a work permit before they employ you. And for you to get a work permit, you have to be offered a job first. So it seemed like people can't get jobs because of that vicious cycle.
I think the other challenge really is the lack of education that's been available to individuals on the camp. And so their skills and education levels are limited by the situation in which they found themselves.
I think part of the problem is that the job market in Ghana is scarce right now. Liberians have a hard time getting employment, and a lot of refugees lack education because they've been in limbo on this camp for 20 years. And they experience a lot of discrimination at the hands of a lot of Ghanaians.
I think more than anything, and probably it would solve several other problems, is communication. I think people don't know what their status is. They don't know what the national health insurance card means for them, and whether they'll be forced to repatriate or whether they're going to be forced to integrate. Certainty really calms a lot of fears, and the fact that they haven't had certainty in so long was striking.
There's just this collective, tangible frustration with all of the refugees. I think if you could take away from all of the meetings that we had, if you could just say one word about what it is that people feel, is just frustration.
I cannot go back. My husband was killed, my child was killed.
And we can't go back in our country on fragile peace. The peace is not stable.
If you're leaving this life you've had for 20 years and going back to this, war-torn country that's still working on building up its economy, $50 in a small suitcase is not enough to really go where you'd want to go. So I think in terms of just some money to start with and some more belongings to go back there with are basics that people would need.
I think they would need some security, that they would have a place to live. So for example, a lot of people, they don't know if their land is still theirs anymore, or if someone else lives there. They don't necessarily know if they have a school to send their kids to. They don't know if they have a job. So I think more information about what is available for them to return.
Access to healthcare and education, and at least something to get them back on their feet when they get into that society, because they've been in limbo for 20 years and they don't want to be a burden. If they go back to Liberia, you don't want to be a burden. You want to be able to help your community.
There was a lot of discussion when we were there 2 years ago about the need for education and the need of the refugees, a real sense that they needed to be able to get educated, be able to rebuild their minds so they could rebuild their hearts, and then they'd be able to go back and rebuild Liberia.
And I think in about 2005, he told us there had been announcements on the camp on the loudspeakers from the United Nations talking about repatriation, encouraging everyone to go back to Liberia, talking about how the United Nations would help you to do that. He liked the idea of going back to Liberia. So he was heading back there. He was in a car with, I think, a number of other people. Some state immigration officials who'd been at the checkpost had been following them and brutally attacked them. And the man I talked to had these pictures showing stab wounds all over his body. His leg had to be amputated in the end because it had been so badly wounded. He was brought back to Ghana and he was given a prosthetic leg by the United Nations, but he was just terrified of the idea of returning to Liberia, and he'd seen firsthand that it wasn't safe.
We are just left like a slave, and we live on a camp like a slave camp. In the night time, you see everybody running to go to bed. Daybreak, you're thinking what to do for children to eat. Sister, we are suffering.
It is important to remember that under international law, refugees who are being integrated into the country are entitled to all the same rights and benefits as are other non-nationals. But when you're talking about the Liberians and consider what they've been through, we need to take into consideration that they may need more, that they will likely need more in terms of access to education. But beyond that, in looking at sort of what the Liberians would need to really be able to successfully integrate, we'll need to consider what they need in terms of job training programs so that they can enter into the labor market force, what they might need in terms of assistance in paying the premiums for the health insurance policies. The Liberians who've been in Buduburam have been there for a long time without access to a lot of benefits and a lot of services that are necessary so that they can begin to really rebuild their lives or build their lives in a way that will allow them to successfully integrate into Ghanaian society.
People seemed reluctant about integration and some outright against it because there is this there's this fear of discrimination that a lot of the refugees have experienced.
Doctor recommended that she be taken to a hospital in Ghana for further treatment. One of her wounds was she had been shot in the back of her head, and she's got a hole in her eye. And she said the staff at that hospital treated her really badly because she was Liberian, and they constantly told her things like, you're a refugee, even if you were to be sent outside the country, you don't even have money, how would you ever pay for it? And this is a waste of our resources to even operate on you because you probably going to develop cancer anyway. She said she was supposed to go back to that hospital, and I said, well, why didn't you go back? And then she said, I couldn't go back because of how they treated me. And then I said, well, what do they do? And then she said, well, because I'm a refugee. She didn't say because I'm Liberian, but she said because she was a refugee. They just had this attitude towards her of she wasn't worthy of treatment.
I guess I'm skeptical about the idea that you can rescind a refugee status from a person. I think that once a person has been considered or deemed a refugee, they're probably going to be a refugee for life because they're probably going to be scarred for life. And they're probably going to feel the ramifications of being a refugee for life.